was the Garden of Eden in Turkey. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 riverheads. The name of the first is Pishon. It is the one which skirts the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and the onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one which goes around the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Tigris. It is the one which goes toward the east of Assyria. The fourth river is the Euphrates. Genesis 2:10-14. There's a tradition of old maps according to which the Garden of Eden was located in Armenia. The map above started my year-long quest for it. The location of Mount Ararat is known, supposedly. It's in the easternmost part of Turkey, bordering Armenia. But no matter how I twisted and turned the map, the lakes didn't match up. There is no lake directly adjacent to Mount Ararat, the nearest lake. To the west is Lake Van in Turkey. In Armenia there is Lake Sevan. For a long time I mistakenly thought the terrestrial paradise must be somewhere in between the two, based on old maps. Bottom left is Lake Van. To its right is Mount Ararat, called Agridagi. It's where Noah's Ark is said to have landed after a worldwide flood. The mountain boasts a tourist center and tour guides to focus people's attention on this spot. Behind the mountain is the border to Armenia, and beyond that Lake Sevan. But it looks nothing like the map above. How could the old map get it so wrong? Or has the landscape changed this radically since the map was drawn in the year 1780?
The map was made by Thomas Bowen, a Welsh engraver and cartographer who was renowned for his accuracy. His father was Emmanuel Bowen, cartographer to King George II and Louis XV. These were map makers of the highest order.
I took a closer look at the old map. South of the Garden of Eden, we find Lake Thospites and a city called Nineveh, which is also mentioned in the Bible. Google and AI told me that Lake Thospites is the old name for Lake Van. This would mean that the lake within the terrestrial paradise on Lowen's map is not Lake Van. I'd have to turn the map and view it from a different perspective, but upon further examination, that didn't make any sense either. Lake Thospites was not Lake Van. Nineveh is today called Mosul in Iraq. Working up from there, I discovered an entirely different location for Eden. Late in my research, I realized that the location of today's Mount Ararat and equating Lake Thospites with Lake Van are both misdirection. Google and AI equals frequent misdirection. In my self-educated opinion, the terrestrial paradise shown in these maps is in the Elazig region of Turkey, a bit further to the west but still part of eastern Turkey. This geographical layout is a 100% match to the old map. At the bottom you find Mosul, Nineveh. North of Nineveh we still find Lake Van, the large lake to the right of the old map. Lake Van is outside of the borders of paradise, and the lake inside paradise, or at least half of it is within the borders of paradise according to the old map, is no longer there, but we see its outlines on the left. Do you see that circle above the town labelled Malatya? I believe the terrestrial paradise, according to the 1780 map, was said to be in the Elazig region of Turkey, but not where you see the town Elazig on Google Earth. That would have been underwater in Eden, rather the area to the east and northeast of Elazig. The geography matches. The mountain ranges also match. Directly south of Paradise we find Mount Taurus on the old map. The Taurus mountain range is still south of the Elazig province today. This means that today's Mount Ararat is not Mount Ararat, if the old maps are to be believed. Once I let go of my stubborn insistence that the modern Mount Ararat is the ancient one, the veil lifted and I saw clearly. But the map says Armenia. Some protest, yes. But as you'll see on old maps, eastern Turkey was called Armenia. Even today, the mountains of eastern Turkey are still known as the Armenian Highlands. This old map by Herodotus shows that in fact all of Turkey may have once been called Armenia. At some point, Armenia was also referred to as Tartaria, as seen on this medieval map. The Bible says that 4 rivers sprang from the Garden of Eden to flow eastward. These rivers were called Euphrates, Tigris, Pishon, and Gihon. Based on this Bible verse, most Christians claim that Eden was in Mesopotamia, modern Iraq. But this is not where the rivers originate, it's where they end. The names Pishon and Gihon no longer exist, but Euphrates and Tigris still have the same name. Guess where they come from? That's right, in the Armenian highlands in the area of Elazig, from where they flow eastward. There are 4 rivers, Euphrates, Tigris, Murat, and Karasu, and they all originate from eastern Turkey, not from Iraq. Then why is the Garden of Eden associated with Iraq? Perhaps because there's a concerted effort to throw veils on history. The idea that Aden was in Mesopotamia, Iraq, that Ararat borders modern Armenia, or that Lake Van is ancient Thosbites are 3 attempts to obscure the location of Eden. It's fairly easy to ascertain where these rivers originate, so I can only assume the deception is deliberate. And where we find deliberate deception, we usually find a truth. It therefore stands to reason that the Garden of Eden was not some fanciful fairy tale of our ancestors, but an actual reality. But wait, there's more. At the northernmost point of the terrestrial paradise is a place called Ophir. According to the Bible, Ophir, where King Solomon got most of his gold, north of the Elazig region, in the exactly precise location, we find the largest gold mines in Turkey called Kopla Altın Madeni in the province of Erzincan. They are mining gold there to this day.
Notice the town names Erzincan and, a little further, to the east, Erzurum. In German, the word Erz means ore. The definition of ore is
a naturally occurring solid material from which a metal or valuable mineral can be profitably extracted. Wait, what does German have to do with it? The answer to that question is in my book, The Lost Secret of Ancient German. Erzurum was also an ancient place for copper and silver mining. The name of the region, Elazig, is also of interest. It was originally called Elazis and Azis, derived from Arabic, which means the Almighty or God. While looking for Eden in modern-day Armenia, I found no such coincidences and corresponding data, but in the Elazig region I find plenty. You know you're touching on truth when everything lines up with everything else. Looking at the old map, further south we find Babylonia, which, according to the Bible, was ruled by Nimrod, an adversary of God. And sure enough, at the exact distance as on the old map, we find Mount Nemrut, English Mount Nimrod, in Turkey. Mount Nimrod is located right outside of the gates of paradise. It corresponds perfectly with Babylonia on the old map. The entire region of the terrestrial paradise is today populated by a majority of Kurdish people. Turkish Kurdistan is the poorest region of the country. Many Kurdish people claim to derive from the Assyrians. We see Assyria directly adjacent to Eden on the old map. The real Mount Ararat would then be at this mountain range that I've marked on Google Maps. It's directly adjacent to the former lake.
They are an extension of the Taurus mountain range. Inspired by this, you might start digging into the area. But since memory of this is lost, you find no touristic sites, no pilgrimage sites, zero indication of what I'm saying here. If people knew what this region was, that would change rapidly.
The main provinces that encompass Eden appear to be Elazig and Tunceli, note the word Ili, north of it, including parts of the provinces of Bingöl, Erzincan, and Erzurum. The older name of the Tunceli is said to be Dersim, which is Persian for Silver Gate. That's interesting, as Paradise was said to have gates made of precious metals. Erzincan is ancient German for Gold of the King, which is perhaps a reference to King Solomon's gold. On this pre-medieval drawing of the Levant, Tigris and Euphrates can be seen originating from the Taurus mountain chain and ultimately connecting several sacred places and nearly straight lines. This is a page from the 1611 version of the King James Bible. It displays all people having originated from Armenia, which is today called Eastern Turkey. I wonder if it's a coincidence that the German word for door is Tür, which would make Turkey the door and key. The full image, which offers the idea that the Medes and Japhet bloodlines are descended from Noah. Here's yet another old map that confirms that the Great Armenia included Eastern Turkey, not just the small country today known as Armenia. And if you read my book on ancient German, you already know what Armenia means. Ar was the word for earth, and men is simply men. Men of Earth was the name for the place where the first men walked on earth. This is a 1467 map in which Eastern Turkey was Armenia Minor. In old drawings of the Garden of Eden, we see it surrounded by mountains to the east and north. A 1569 map of Turkey. The region of Eden is called Armenia, this time Armenia Major, not Minor, and encircled or protected by mountains. Look closely and you'll find 4 rivers originating there. The Elazig region doesn't seem to have notable landmarks, famous ancient sites, or anything else that would hint it's the cradle of humanity. It's unassuming as any other place in the world. There is Lake Hazar, Hazar stemming from the word Khazar. This is Palu, near where I assume the real Mount Ararat. This map is found in the National Library of France, drawn in the mid-1700s before the map by Loewens. It shows a province called Eden exactly where I've been saying it is, but the map shows a second Eden as well as the terrestrial paradise at the location. Modernists say it is the Ar of southern Iraq, Kuwait, and Iran. This map names both the place where the rivers start and end as Eden. I suspect the cartographers were in disagreement about whether the rivers started in southern Iraq or in Armenia/Turkey. Today the Turkish origin of the rivers is ignored and the narrative of Eden in Iraq is supported. If we go further back in time, to the 1500s, things become clearer. Then we find maps that label Eden as one province of many in eastern Turkey. This map is by Abraham Ortelius. Close up, it's strange that this 1500s mapmaker refers to modern Georgia, Armenia and eastern Turkey as Mesopotamia, when we, in modern times, say Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, was in Iraq. At the center of Eden, we find a city called Najd. This is ancient Arabic and Persian with the following meanings: pure, immaculate, beauty, star, bright. A 1600s drawing of the aforementioned Erzurum, Ophir. Here it is called the capital of Armenia. The following 1,525 map labels the region as Argeus Mons, which means shining mountain. It looks like people in the 1500s still had it right, and later maps distort the location of Eden. For instance, this is claimed to be a 1330 map of the region, but upon investigation I learned that it was drawn in the 1880s. Notice that it's labelled as 1330 when the area was under rule of the Mongols, Tartarians. It's true that the Tartarians controlled this area, but any mention of Eden is erased. What you see here is the deliberate falsification of history. It's people in the late 1800s erasing any mention of Eden and pretending this is the way people saw it hundreds of years ago. Amazingly, my query for maps from the 11th to the 14th centuries brought up nothing but modern renditions of old maps, even though this was one of the most mapped places in the world in medieval times. Someone made sure you do not see real maps from before 1500. Why? I believe it may have been because the events described in the religious books were much more recent, during the Dark Ages, than we are told. This 1783 map has already changed and moved the goalpost slightly to the south and east to bring it closer to Iraq. The change was done gradually over hundreds of years. This one is from 1704, where the area is referred to as the Garden of Earthly Delights. Close up, it is bordered in the south by the Taurus Mountains that still exist with the same name today. This 1550 Portolan map doesn't match the others. It shows the Caspian Sea shaped and aligned differently, and Armenia is a little further north, adjacent to Tartaria, couched between the two large seas. If there's any reality to this map, it would put Paradise in the middle of modern-day Georgia. It would mean the landscape has changed dramatically. I add the map here because it exists. I'm not in the business of cherry-picking only maps that fit my theory.
Another old map that casually places Eden to the west of Lake Van, protected by two long mountain ranges.
A map from 1780 placing Paradise point blank at Erzurum. Ararat is located to its east, right beside Erwan, today's Yerevan. This map is a little closer to the modern understanding of where Ararat is. Close up, this is a little further north than Lowen's map put it, but still within Lowen's borders. Old German drawings label this city as a border city, Grantstadt. It used to be the northernmost border of Armenia as well as Eden. Notice where Erzurum is, a 1500s map of Muscovite Tartaria that doesn't match my theory. Once again we see the Caspian Sea looking different. The Euphrates begins further northeast than suggested by me, again around modern Tiflis. Babylonia is here in fact in Iraq. Eden is not mentioned, but Armenia is. The oldest map I could find, allegedly from the 8th century.
Eden close up in Armenia, which is here beside Cappadocia. Conclusion.
Based on hundreds of old maps, of which you see only a few here, it's safe to say that Armenia encompassed the area of modern-day Armenia and eastern Turkey. I'm sure this much we can all agree on. It's also clear that our ancestors thought this region to be the location of the Garden of Eden, and that placing it in Iraq came much later. This too we can all agree on after viewing the evidence presented here. The areas lay to the west of the modern Lake Van and Mount Ararat, to the east of modern Elazig, and reached up to somewhere around Erzurum, and perhaps even further east.
I am 70% sure it was in this area, and 100% sure it was within this area, or at the very least, this is what our ancestors believed. If I'm wrong about the Elazig region, then the only other reasonable explanation is that the land masses moved so radically that the area between Lake Sevan and Lake Van no longer look the way they used to, and the modern Mount Ararat is in fact the ancient one. A most thorough search for Eden should leave no stone unturned in the entirety of eastern Turkey, Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan.
Some of you have been reading this website for a long time and probably wonder how this article aligns with my article on the terrestrial paradise being in the Far East, around today's Korea. There is a whole different set of maps on that. Luckily, those are the only places to deal with when searching our ancestors' idea of a terrestrial paradise, Korea and eastern Turkey. I don't have the answer to this question. Nothing I write is set in stone. I am gathering puzzle pieces of hundreds of puzzles that have been deliberately mixed, obfuscated, damaged, and hidden. So bear with me as I research. But the medieval maps I shared in that previous article hint at two major energy centers in the world, one in the Far East, which was also known as Paradise, and one in the center of the world, which is possibly the Garden of Eden discussed here. When I draw a straight line from the Eden region in Turkey to the east, I eventually reach North Korea. If I draw a straight line to the west, I reach Washington, D.C. Coincidence? It is interesting to note that the geographic center of Earth's landmasses is in central Turkey. I asked AI and got this answer. Geographic center of Earth's landmasses. The most common scientific interpretation is the geometric centroid, or center of gravity, of all land surfaces on Earth, excluding oceans. Calculations using digital models and geospatial data place this point in central Turkey. That's right, the actual center of Earth is precisely where old maps say we find the Garden of Eden.